So who in the audience didn't see the first part of this talk? Who missed Joe's part? Okay, so that's good and bad. So I'm going to be extending the app that Joe built, but I'll show the app that Joe built so you guys can kind of see where we're starting from and where we're going forward. So in the first part of the talk, Joe built a video search application. So he used a lot of the parts of Silverlight to build a video search, and we're going to take that and add some new functionality to kind of some additional things that aren't just part of the UI stack, but browser integration, some local storage, and also some more customization to make it a little more interesting. So agenda-wise, basically, we're going to go through is we're going to take the layout. Well, let's show the app first, and then we'll talk about what we're going to do to it. So this is the app that Joe just built. There we go. So it's a video search. You've got a nice mouse or events. You can choose different videos to watch. You can search for various things and get a different list of things. So what we're going to do to this app then, go back to the presentation. What was that? Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is add a custom layout so that you kind of get an animated entry when you do a new search. The items kind of pop in from the bottom. We're going to change the look of the aforementioned fugly search button to something a little better, not great, because we want to kind of have an economy of XAML, not use too much XAML there. We're going to show some local storage so that when you do a search, you remember what your last search was. So the next time you go back to the page, either in any browser on the machine, you will get your last search. So that's one cool thing about local storage. We're going to show some HTML integration to get browser history navigation. So as you pick different videos, you can go back and forth and kind of use the back and forth buttons in the browser to navigate between states in your Silverlight application. We're going to show you the open file dialog, which is a way that lets you prompt the user to pick a file, and then when they pick a file, you get a stream back for that. And we'll show that to play back local video inside this video player. And then we'll talk more about deep zoom, which was that image zooming technology that Scott Goose showed in the Hard Rock demo this morning. We'll talk about how it works, what it is, how it ticks, and we'll build a demo out with that. And finally, hopefully we'll have time for some Q&A at the end. And one thing I'd also like to say, thank you for sticking around. I know it's kind of the end of the day, and it's probably most people's first or second night in Vegas when they're settled in. They're looking to maybe get a drink on later tonight. So I appreciate you for sticking around and staying sober for another hour. So first things first, all the stuff, all the demos I'm going to show you, the stuff Joe just had, is up on my blog right now. So if you guys have already installed the Silverlight Beta 2, you've got the VS Tools on your machine, you can go download it right now. Go get the samples, play with them on your machine. You can follow along, so you don't have to stare at the smaller text up here if you can't see from the back. So go grab those and play along. So basically what Joe showed you in building his video search is that with Silverlight 2, you now have a rich UI framework built in. Silverlight 1 was all about media, animation, graphics, and a combined XML stack. But with Silverlight 2, you now add components and a UI framework to that, and it really, really, really lets you quickly build things with very little code. So you can build, kind of really Ajax++ experiences with, not a lot of work. I mean, the code he wrote there isn't nearly as much as you'd have to do a similar thing in Ajax. And a lot of those things, like playing back media, you just can't do in Ajax. So with a little code, you can do quite a bit, but with a little more code, you can do even more. You can take your app to 11 with Silverlight 2, as I like to say. So has anyone seen Spinal Tap? Anyone familiar with that? It goes to 11. Okay, so a little picture, some pictures I put together. So Silverlight 1 had a couple of really cool tricks up its sleeve. It had, full screen mode. It had video brush, which Joe showed to, change the foreground and background of the text block. It had, the downloader, which gave you download progress. It had a few cool tricks in its sleeve, but it was pretty limited in what it could do. If you wanted to write a lot of code, you get a lot of things done, but there weren't a lot of kind of built-in cool tricks. Silverlight 2 has a lot more cool tricks built in. So kind of your mental models, you have a lot more tools in your box now. You have a lot more, you can plot, you can tweeze, you can use your pliers, and whatnot. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about custom controls and components and tack some stuff on there to that application. So the point here to understand is that with the .NET programming model built into Silverlight 2 is you now have reusability and componentization built in, which is just hugely powerful. I wrote a lot of JavaScript code against Silverlight 1 for about 2 years as we were developing it, and I boy, do I miss IntelliSense, and really good debugging, and being able to create components. And the fact that you get that back with .NET is really, really powerful. So with some common things you can do here, the first thing we're going to show is actually creating a custom component. So Joe created that user control that was his details view. That was a class, right? He encapsulated that class. You could instance that in XAML. Someone else could grab that code or even a DLL and just use that, right? It's built up and componentized and very reusable. The layout engine can also be extended. So in the box, we've got the stack panel, we've got the grid, we've got canvas, which is really equivalent to no layout. It's just absolute positioning. And we've got a way that you can extend the layout engine and create some really cool animations. I'll show you how to build a really simple a simple layout, and then I'll show you how to do a slightly more complicated one, and we'll build that into the demo. There's also attached properties, which is something that Silverlight has, which we inherited from WPF, which is a way that you can add new functionality to existing objects. So you can teach an old dog some new tricks, which is pretty cool. And also, just in general, you can create classes to encapsulate common functionality, which is, again, something you really can't do in JavaScript. You can kind of fake it a little bit with extending functions, but it's not real encapsulation. So we'll also be doing quite a bit of that during this talk. At least I'll be showing off some classes that are helper classes I've written. So the first thing we're going to do is create a custom layout. So we'll go to VS, and we'll create a new project. So just create a C# Silverlight app here. And so the first thing we want to do here is just create a new class, which is something that if you've ever done any .NET programming is probably pretty common. So add a class. And we're going to make a custom panel. So I'll call it I'm actually going to make a stack panel. I know we have a stack panel, but stack is the easiest one to write. So that takes the least amount of code. So I'll show you that first, and then we'll make it a little more interesting. So we'll call it custom stack. And so this is a typical .NET class. So we're going to have this inherit from panel, which is the base class for containers. And to use a class in XAML, you have to give it a public default constructor. So we'll do that here. And then to create a custom layout, there's two methods you have to override. You have to override measure and arrange. So basically, the container goes through on measure, and it says, all my children, how big do you want to be? And then they report back how big they want to be. And then you do arrange, which is the second pass. You go through, and you ask the children, you figure out how big they want to be, and then you say, OK, this is where you're going to be, and this is your actual size that you get. So the first thing you do is override measure. So measure override. And so I want to just return our available size. And then we're going to loop over each of the children. Also, all the children in Silverlight are all UI elements, just like in WPF. So we'll loop over all the children in the collection here. And then we're going to call measure on each one. So measure takes a size, which is basically a kind of hint size to the child. So we'll create a new size. And for the hint, we're going to tell it, for a stack panel, your kind of mental model is you want it to be as wide as your container, and you want it to be as tall as it wants to be. So for that, we're basically going to use the desired size of the panel for the width. And then we're going to, this is a little bit of black magic in the layout system here. To tell it to be as wide as it wants, or as tall as it wants to be, you pass in the not a number for double. So this is basically equivalent to, auto, if you will, for sizing. So that's going to tell each of the children to be as wide as our container and as tall as they'd like to be. And then we're going to override the arrange override. And similarly here, we're going to now position them where they should be in a stack. So again, we'll return final size. So here we're going to have a double property, which is the top, because each one we're going to position below the next one. So we're going to keep track of the top or the bottom of the previous one. So we'll start at 0. So again, we're going to loop over all the UI elements. And then we're going to call arrange on each child. So a range takes a rectangle, which is not only the size it wants to be, but where the element is actually going to be located. So we'll blast in a new rectangle. And so for a stack panel, you always want the left to be at 0. And we're going to use our top property, our top field that we declared there to tell each method or each item where it's going to be in the top. Then we'll pass in the same width, which is the actual width of the panel, so the desired size of the panel. And then the height is going to be the desired size of the child. So, and of course, we have to increment top to the desired size of the desired height of the child. By the way, Joe, when you were talking, there's no H at the end of height. It's not height. It really bothers me. No problem. All right, so we're going to build that now. And to use a custom element in XAML, you have to go back to your page. And as Joe showed you, you need to add a namespace declaration. So we're going to bring one of those out here. So what this says is basically map this L variable in markup to be the any classes inside of this actual assembly. So now inside of our grid, we'll create our custom stack, and then we'll add a bunch of buttons in there, and we'll set content to be text. We'll just copy that and we'll add a bunch of them. So now assuming I didn't screw anything up when we run this, yes, we want to add a config file. You'll see we have a bunch of buttons that are stacked up. So that's not terribly interesting, but you notice that they resize appropriately as the browser resizes to the appropriate width. So let's make that layout a little more interesting. So that's kind of the easiest layout you'll ever see. Because the real stack panel in Silverlight takes advantage of it listens to margins and other properties on the children. So the real one in Silverlight's a little more complicated than that. However, I've got this animated version of the stack panel that I'll drag in. And so we'll look at this code here. So what this class does is it inherits from this base class, animating panel base. This was written by one of my friends, Robbie Engelbertson, who works for IdentityMine. He used to work for the WPF team as well. And what this class does is it inherits from panel. It has an option. So instead of calling a range, you call this set element location. And what this does is it animates something from where it is to where you're arranging it to be. And so by doing this, you can essentially create really interesting animated layouts. And so I'm inheriting from that base, and I'm basically putting my stack panel logic on top of that. So it's a little more complicated because basically the first time I position everything, I want it to not animate. I want it to be fixed below everything, so these things kind of pop up from the bottom. So that's why I have this field here. And basically the first pass in a range, I set them all to be 1500, which is basically below where the screen's going to be, the size of the app. And then after that, I animate them to where they go until they'll kind of pop in from the bottom. So now if we build this guy, and we go back to our XAML, and we change this to be, instead of the custom stack, we have it be an animating stack panel. Now you'll see when we run this, these controls will kind of pop in from the bottom. It's a trap. Good catch. Thank you. So that's kind of a cool effect. It's a little gratuitous, of course, but it's kind of neat. Yes, everyone wants their sites to be like that. So the other cool thing about the base class is it has a few interesting properties on it that you can control the animation. So one is force. So this default's the one I want to set it to 2. So if I set this out, they'll have a little more swiftness to them. So they won't be quite like they're floating through molasses. So now they pop up a little quicker. So now let's take this layout and let's go back to Joe's original project that we're starting out with, and let's change the normal stack panel in here to be this animated stack panel. So again, we'll drag in our stack panel to this project here. We'll build it. So Joe showed item templates inside of the items control. Templating is kind of a concept that a lot of parts of Silverlight and the general WPF UI framework takes advantage of. So the idea of a template is something that you can replace. You can pull something out and replace it with something else entirely. And so what we're going to do for the items control, it has a panel template. So for the items control, we can set its panel, its items panel, which needs to be an items panel template. So in here, we basically give it a different layout. So we've got a little bug with VS right now where it doesn't, inside of templates, it doesn't know about custom types just yet in IntelliSense. So we don't get too much help there. So basically what I've done is I've said, inside of the items control, instead of using your default layout, which is a stack panel, use this animating stack panel instead. And because we don't want them to look like they're going through molasses, we'll set our force to 2 there as well. So now when we run this app, you'll see that instead of the results of the search being dynamic, they kind of pop in from the bottom. So you get kind of a slightly more interesting
Someone once
effect there.
said that nature is red in tooth and claw.
If you search for something
but that
else,
applies equally well.
I'm trying to pick things that I can search for that aren't going to be as racy as some of the stuff Joe got. So, all right. So that's what, a little bit about custom layout and then using custom layouts inside of an items control. So another thing that I kind of alluded to and Joe showed, and I'll show a little more, is that Silverlight is really designed, the UI framework is really designed for complete UI flexibility. The idea that one of the folks who was on the UIFX team who built a lot of the controls that are in the SDK, they said they really like the model where anything can be inside of anything else, which is kind of the general principle. You can kind of stick anything anywhere. And that model lets you, allows you to have a lot of flexibility and be really creative with the things you do. And generally speaking, change the look of something without changing your code. So as far as control customization goes, there's kind of 2 levels of control customization. There's styling, which is more of a lighter changing of the way things look. So think about changing font properties, font size, background brushes, foreground brushes, a much smaller set of things you might typically set with CSS. The idea of skinning is more complicated, where you're basically replacing the entire look and feel of, or look and parts of a control. So you're basically entirely replacing the XAML that represents it with a new set of XAML, and you're still having the same underlying functionality underneath it. So you basically have the 2 models that we have inside of Silverlight. So the styling model is you typically expose through controls, through properties on controls, so you can go set the font size or the font family on a control. And the skinning model is accomplished through what's known as control templates. So I'm going to show you a very simple control template. I'm going to gloss over a lot of the details. The talk that Karen, that Joe plugged like 14 times, that Karen's giving tomorrow, I believe at 10:30, goes into much more details about the templating model, about styling, and about using resources to do application-wide styles and a bunch of other really interesting things with controls and application look and feel. So don't miss that talk. It's goodness. So basically what I'm going to do here is change the look of the button using a control template in the search. So just run the app one more time. So what we've got here is this button. It's just a normal button.
Here with Doug, and we'll help you make money in the stock market with information you can't find anywhere else.
Hey, and we sent
so this button is just your typical button. It's got content and it's got a handler hooked up to it. So when you search for it, when you search for something,
we have Maurice Gallagher.
You get results by clicking it. So if we look at the XAML for that, pretty straightforward. You've got a button. It's got a margin, so it's a little farther away from the text box. You've got a click, and you've got content. So instead of content here, what we'll do is we'll change this to be an image. Now, I have a super simple image that I stole from MSN Video Search. And so normally I would show a richer set of XAML for this than just an image, but in order to get basically an economy of XAML here, it'll be much easier just to use an image at first. So we're going to start with that for the template. So basically what we're going to do is replace the look and feel of this button with that image, and then we're going to add some animations to it so it kind of pops, it scales up and down as you interact with it with your mouse. So first things first, is we'll remove the content, and we'll add a button. We'll add a template. So inside the control template, you basically, this is where you put a whole new UI tree for your button. So in here you can put anything. So if I have nothing in here, you'll basically get nothing. The button will look like nothing, which we'll show you real quick. No button because we have no visual tree anymore. So now we can go through, and we'll start with a grid. Give that a name. So I'm going to name this root element. There's one key part about control templating is the model that we have in Silverlight is based upon named states and named UI elements, and that the control goes and looks for it. Karen's going to dig a lot more into that tomorrow, so you should highly encourage you to go check out that talk and learn more about it. Basically, just know for the purposes of a button, your root element has to be called root_element. Basically, as the next public release of Blend comes out, they'll have much more advanced options for doing this entirely in Blend. You won't have to write any example by hand. They'll have really great tooling support for that. They're just kind of prototyping that now, and it's not really ready for public consumption. But the idea behind this model is to be very toolable. So inside the grid, we'll add an image. I'm not sure how that got there. And we'll point it to that image that we dragged in. And now when we run this, you'll see that the button looks like that image. It doesn't have any interactivity to it. However, it still has a click event because it's still a button. So if you search for something,
Good morning for Wall Street Media. I'm Cynthia. I'm here with Doug.
you still get results. You can see our lemur again. I've watched this video so many times over the last couple weeks. It almost never gets old. Anyways. Does anyone know anything about zoology and animal? Like, are lemurs always like that? Is it just something they do, or is that one just special? I don't know. Okay. So now to get something more interesting, to add some interactivity to this template, we're going to fire up Blend. This is the new preview that was released today. So, as I mentioned, they don't have all the styling support built in to style stuff yet. So, for control templating. So I'm going to kind of build up an application or an animations on the fly. So first things first, we'll add our image here. Then I'll add some animations. So generally speaking, the way that the parts model works is you have things called states and you have things called elements. And so states are animation, elements are UI elements. So for the state here, what we're going to do is basically just change this at 0.3 seconds. We're going to scale it up a little bit so when you hover your mouse over it, it will look bigger. So we'll pick the scale transform, and we'll change it from 1 to 1.05, which is 11. It's huge. That's right. Nice. I knew I liked this crowd. All right. So basically, if we see what that looks like, it just kind of pops up the button a little bit when you mouse over it. We could make it ridiculous, but it turns out subtle is a little better. So then we'll, yeah, exactly. So then we'll have a press state, which will do kind of the exact opposite. And we'll make this just slightly smaller than 1. And then we'll also have one that's the normal state. And this one, we're just going to basically make 1. So we'll grab the XAML here. Let's see. Okay, good. It popped out. So let's see. So just grab our image. So again, once the proper tooling model for this, which the one team is working on, comes out, we won't have to do any of this arduous copying and pasting. But for the time being, we're just going to do a little copy and pasting. And rid of some of the stuff we don't need here. Okay, and then we'll grab our animations that we just created, which are all in resources. And so we'll put those inside of the grid, which is basically the root of our template. And we need to make this grid resources. Now again, assuming I didn't screw anything up. So you see that like that. That's why she's giving the talk on control templating tomorrow. I just dig ditches. All right, so there's your button that it's got some animations built in now with the template. Okay, so now we'll talk a little bit about local storage. So Silverlight 2 has this, basically has taken the .NET concept of isolated storage and kind of moved it to the web space. So I think Scott mentioned it this morning, and Joe mentioned a little bit as well. The concept is really, it's cookies on steroids. It's the ability for you to just have, by default, a meg of storage for your app. You can put anything you want there, streams, text, whatever, and then you can fish it out later. The other cool thing, which I'll show you in a sec, is that it works across browsers. So it's storage for your app. It's based on basically where your app comes from, and it's kind of per user, per machine. So regardless of what browser you hit it from, you still get access to your storage. Also, if you feel like your application needs a little more legroom than a megabyte, if you will, to stretch out, you can request additional storage via an API and isolated storage, and that will actually prompt the user with a request for how much storage you need, and they can click yes or no, and you can respond to that basically. If they click yes, the API returns true, and you can kind of go about your business. Or if it's false, you have to find out how to live with your constraints of 1 megabyte. And again, these are exposed to the ISO store APIs and .NET. So we'll do a quick demo of that. And for this, what we're going to do is we're going to use isolated storage to store what your last search was, so that when you come back to the app, when you launch it again, your last search is saved. So now we're going to jump into some code, and we'll go into the C# file. So basically what we're going to do is when you search, which is either click the button or hit enter on the text box, it calls this search videos method here. And so in search videos, we're going to go ahead and add some code to write to the isolated storage. So I'm going to drag out this code. I'm not going to do this as often as Joe did, but this code is, you'll see why I'm dragging this stuff out. It's a little fugly. Now, basically here you've got this isolated storage file that you're calling a static off this isolated storage file to get one for the application. So basically your application just has one of these. You always get back the same one if you call it from the same application, or basically coming from the same URL. And then you basically create a stream inside from your ISO store. You give it a name. So here we're going to call it search text. And then from your stream, you have to find some way to get text into the stream. Stream writer is the typical .NET thing. And so then you can, it's going to do some fancy VS features here. Let's get our namespaces added. So now we can write a string. So we can write the textbox.text. So that's what it looks like to do isolated storage. Now, I can't stand this code. It's so verbose. Like, I want to write one string. So back to the encapsulation and helper classes. So forget all this stuff. It's garbage. I wrote this helper class called local storage, which, because this stuff is all static, it's all just statics. So drag this guy in. So we want to write a string, right? So we'll call it local storage. How about write string? There you go. So this just encapsulates all that goo for you. It's actually not a very big class. It's really handy. And so we want to call it search text, and we want to save the text box.text. So now we stored it. So basically, whenever you do a search, we store it. And then we need to, when the app loads, we need to fish it back out. So now when the app loads, instead of calling get videos randomly, we're going to check to see if we have that there, again, using our helper class. And we'll see if we have anything in there. And if we do, we'll call get videos with a search. And if not, we'll call the initial random one. So first things first, we'll set the text box to be our value. And we'll call read string. A little more about my favorite helper class. It also does dictionaries for you, so you can just read and write dictionaries. So if you want to use that for some other heavy lifting besides strings, you can use that as well. So call read string, call search text. So now we basically set the text box text to fish that out of the local storage, and then we'll do a search on that one. So now we're going to run this. So we'll search for funny, and you'll notice that it pops up, and if we go shut this down, and we run it again, you'll notice that I remember we searched for funny, which is kind of cool. But of course, it also works across browsers. Close this guy down. So if we go to that same page in Firefox, you'll notice that it also read from the ISO store, which is kind of cool. And by the way, for the IA person, I am running i8 on this one, so I don't see any problems. It's working great for me. So the question was what kind of something about the prompt? Was the question? Oh, so the isolated storage, the question was how do you know how much data you have in there? The isolated storage has an available space and bytes property, and you can query how much is left. And if you try to write past that, you get an exception. So, okay, back to the slide deck. So the next little bit is talking about HTML DOM integration. So HTML DOM is the DOM bridge, as we call it, is a kind of wide set swath of APIs inside of Silverlight for interacting with the browser. Because Silverlight apps are browser apps, it's pretty important that you can interact with your host. And in a lot of cases, you can do things that either aren't in Silverlight or are, basically are things that aren't explicitly in Silverlight because we haven't added that functionality yet, or aren't in Silverlight because we have difficulties doing them across all the browsers. Like Scroll Wheel is a great example. From the plugin architecture that we have that Silverlight is built on, in IE it's an ActiveX control, and everything else is a Netscape plugin. And the Netscape APIs, as implemented in Safari, don't give you scroll wheel. So we don't have any APIs that don't work everywhere, so we don't have scrolling. However, I'll show you guys later, I wrote a little scroll sample because in JavaScript, you can actually get scroll events. And so I have a little scroll helper that you can use to do scrolling in all the browsers. So the HTML DOM bridge is really interesting because it lets you talk out to the browser, and also from JavaScript, you can talk back into Silverlight. So you can push data communications both ways. And you can also do things like Joe showed. You can do alert, and you can push through things like that. It's also really handy if you have existing widgets and you're not looking to replace an entire application with Silverlight, just have little islands of functionality. You can go talk to other parts of your page through the DOM bridge. So again, there's a talk tomorrow about Ajax with Silverlight that talks more about HTML DOM and local storage. That's Friday morning. And so this one is going to go into more details than I will on some of this stuff. And so it's definitely good to check out if you're interested in more of the HTML interop aspects of this. So back to our app. So basically what we're going to do here is change it so that when you add functionality, so when you pick a video, we're going to add browser history navigation. So when you add a video, we're going to add a back button entry, and so you can navigate back and forth between videos using the back and forward buttons. So again, I'm going to drag in a helper class here. This one is a little more complicated. Oops, wrong one. No higher. Navigation Manager. So this was actually written by one of our interns last summer. It's a really cool class. The API is still a little rocky, but it's up on my blog. You guys can play with it. But basically what it lets you do is register yourself as a kind of state holder, and then you tell the manager, like, hey, save a state, and it goes and calls a method to get a state dictionary from you. And then when it navigates, it gives you back the state dictionary, and you can kind of repopulate your state based on that. So first things first, we have to implement this navigation state interface. So we'll go fill that out later. That's now at the bottom. We'll fill those out. These are the methods. So this is what the manager calls back to say, basically give me a state bag. And once you navigate, it says, here's your state bag. Go reconstitute yourself. And then this one is basically an ID. So if you have you can have this class can be used across multiple islands in a Silverlight or in a web page. So if you have multiple of those, this is a string that uses to disambiguate the different ones, so it knows which ones it's servicing. So at the top, we're going to register with the Navigation Manager to tell it that we are interested in using its services. And then what we're going to do is, basically on navigation, we're going to store the index of the video in the list. So we're going to mess around with the data context to find the index. So Joe showed you a lot about the data context in the last talk, and we're going to use that here. So the stack panel mouse left button down event. This is when you click, each of those items is a stack panel in the list, and when you click the stack panel, you get this event handler happening. So what we're going to do here is we're going to actually fish out the index of the video, and we're going to store that using the Navigation Manager. So we need a private field for the index. Call it video index here. And then we'll set this based on the current context. And we've got this videos collection, which is all the videos in the list. That's the complete list. And it's got an index of. So we use that method. And now we just need to give it a video source. So we've got a video source right here, right up here, is this guy. And so we'll just cast the data context to a video source. And then we'll tell the Navigation Manager that we'd like to register a state, register an entry. So we're going to say save. So when you call save, what it does is it goes through and it's going to fall back and call this method. And this is where we give it a dictionary of the stuff we care about. So in this dictionary, we'll add an index property. Oops. That's our video index. So that's basically the current video index. And then we'll return it. And then when we get called back on a state change, we will reconstitute that based on what's in the property bag. So we have to check against the case in basically the first time it's called or you navigate back to the original page if it's empty. So if the properties bag we get back is empty, we'll set it to 0. But if it's not empty, we'll set the index. So basically what we're going to do to set this is we're going to set the data context on the details view again based on the index that we stored away and we fished back out. So the data context again is just the data source that has the video URL, the title, the description, which is from that list of videos. And then we need to index into it. And our index into it is going to be, so we put, actually, hold on. So this thing is a string dictionary, so we can't put it in an int, we have to put in a string. And then, of course, on the way back out, we have to parse the string. And we're going to parse what we get out of the properties bag for index. And of course, if there's nothing in there, we just want this to be the first video. So we'll just say 0. All right, and We'll call this video search for our disambiguating string. All right. A lot of code there. It's pretty dense, I know. So now as we go through, we pick different videos. Unfortunately, it's taking a while to load, but you'll notice that as we click through, you're getting entries up here. And so now we can navigate back and forth between these just using the browser back and forth buttons. So not a lot of code. All right. So the last thing we're going to do to this application here, before we talk about Deep Zoom, is talk about the Open File Dialog. So as I kind of mentioned earlier a little bit, Open File Dialog is it's a way for you to show a file dialog to the user, have him pick a file, and you don't get back the file entry or the path where it came from, but you basically get back a stream. So this is really useful for doing things like uploading to a server, or because we've added some new APIs to image and media element, you can actually play back local videos or playback or load up local images from the user's hard drive. So you can kind of create a super uploader where you can preview what you're going to upload beforehand in Silverlight. So it's pretty neat there. Another thing that we support that HTML doesn't is the ability to multi-selection inside the Open File Dialog. So you can create you can do a photo uploader that you can do a whole directory of images fairly easily with this stuff. So what I'm going to do is add the ability to play to this video player to play a video from the local machine using the Open File Dialog. So to do this, we're going to edit Joe's details view control. If everyone remembers, this is the oh, come on. This is the details view in the video. And so what we're going to do is add some code to, when you click the media element, to show an Open File Dialog. So we've got the media element inside this, and it is named media, and we'll click the mouse left button up event. And so when someone clicks the media element, we need to show an Open File Dialog, so we'll create one of those. OFD. Open File Dialog also supports setting filter strings, so you can only have specific types of file extensions that you care about. I can never, ever, for the life of me, remember the syntax, so I always just copy it. It's basically great. It goes back to the days of old school Win32 programming. It hasn't changed any since then at all. So basically what this filter does is it gives you all the supported media types inside of Silverlight. So you get WMA, WMV, and MP3s to play back. Also, as I mentioned before, you can do multi-selection. So we can say enable multi-selection equals true, and now we've got a multi-selection box, which is pretty handy. And then, of course, we'll show it. So the typical pattern for these, if you've ever used WinForms or WPF, the typical pattern for these is you call show dialog on it, and it returns a dialog result. And so basically, like what happened when the dialog popped up. So if they click OK, if they actually pick something, you want to go ahead and act on their selection. So what we'll do here is we'll now set the source of the media element to be a stream from the file they've selected. So we can call the setSource method, which basically takes a stream, and we'll call we'll take the selected file, and we'll call OpenRead, which basically gives you a stream back. So that's all you need to do to play back a video. Now, because the rest of this thing is data bound, and we don't want to screw up the data bindings, for the titles, I'm going to create a new video source for the title and the description. So media from local machine. So this is what it'll show in the title. And we'll just have an empty description. And then this dot data context equals VS. So now I run this. Network comes. Video pops up. We click the media element. It brings up the Open File Dialog. We can There we go. Take a sweet time. So you can do multi-selection here. There's kind of a couple of audio files in there. But we've also got this media file, this video file here. So we'll double-click this, and now we're playing back the video from the local machine, which is basically the one line of code. And notice that we've set the video from local machine. And of course, because we didn't script the data bindings, you can still go and navigate back and forth. So again, you can use that for images and media, just playing back that stuff from the local machine. Or, once you have that stream, you can manipulate it, you can upload it, you can do all kinds of neat stuff. No, it is a read-only stream. We're not letting you arbitrarily write on users' hard drives. Dean was talking about how his kid was asking, "Dad, did you break the internet?" Our team's goal is to not break the internet either, as a general rule. So we like to be pretty careful with where and how we extend the sandbox. All right, so deep zoom. So this is the technology that Scott and the Hard Rock guys showed this morning. So basically what it allows you to do is treat a really large image as if it's a really small image from the perspective of download size, and it lets you basically an image almost gets vector-like behaviors with this technology because you're only loading what you show, and as you load different tiles of different resolutions, they kind of seamlessly fade between the lower resolution and the higher resolution, and you really get a very seamless experience, and it almost lets you treat image data like a vector. So from a user experience perspective, it's way better. From a data serving perspective, it's way better. Your TCO is way down because you're only serving the bits of the image that people are actually drilling into, and it's pretty easy to use from an app author perspective. So how does this stuff work? Basically, there's a pre-processing tool, which I'll show you in a sec, that is, again, publicly available as of today. You can go download this thing, and it imports images, and it breaks them into 256 by 256 pixel tiles at different resolutions. So it takes the largest image, and it breaks it down into tiles. It then takes an image a quarter of the size and breaks that into tiles. It does a quarter of size again and breaks those into tiles until it gets down to something that fits into one tile. And actually, if you look at what the tool does, it's way more aggressive than that. It'll get it down to still the thing is just one little dot. The tool is pretty aggressive. But basically, it just dumps these into a little folder structure where each level is a different folder name, and there's a little XML file at the end that talks about each level and where they go to. So essentially, what happens is when this is exposed through a multi-scale image in Silverlight. When the multi-scale image loads up its source, it gets the lowest resolution first, as fast as it can, so you see something immediately. And then as it zooms in, you basically are downloading higher resolution versions, and they're kind of smoothly blended in as you go through. So it's kind of subtle there, but the image kind of pops in. So as I mentioned, it's called the element in XAML is called multi-scale image. And basically, you just take what the pre-processing tool outputs, you drop it in. You don't want to put it inside your Zap because the Zap is, your entire application. And you obviously, for this stuff, you want to load stuff outside your application. So you want to put it in your client bin directory where you're, basically living on your website. And then you just point the multi-scale image's source to that, and it'll load it up. So let's see how this works here. So first things first, we'll fire up the Deep Zoom Composer, which is the pre-processing tool. So this is something the Expression team has been working on. This is a very, very, very young, new product in its infancy. So there's a few quirks to it for now, so just kind of play along. So first things first, we'll add an image to it. I've got this picture I took in Seattle a couple of months ago of the Seattle PI, which is our newspaper. Their headquarters has this big spinning globe thing on it. So I took this picture a couple of months ago. It was actually one of the few blue days in Seattle. And so then this image was taken with my Canon SLR. So it's like an 8 megapixel image. It's not super huge, but it's a couple thousand pixels. And so we'll go to the export thing, and we'll just call it PI globe, and we'll tell it to export. Now here's where the quirkiness of the tool comes in. So for whatever reason, this dialog never goes away, which is awesome. However, the show folder does work. And when you see when we see this folder pop up, we know we're done. Okay, we're good. So goodbye, good night. I didn't write the tool, I just use it. Okay, so now we're done with this project. So fire up VS, create a new one. How big is the output? I took out the math equation. Basically, so this is all based on a bunch of Microsoft research guys' projects, and they have this really cool, in the spec for this, they have a really cool equation. Basically, it maps to about because of the tiling, and they do quarters, if you do the summation of that over basically infinity size, you get up to a maximum of 1.33 extra size, or 133% the size of the original image is the total size of everything in all your folders. So basically, it's just a little bit bigger. But again, you're not serving all of it up. You're only serving the tiles up that people actually download. So in most cases, you're serving far less than you would if you served the whole image originally. So we'll create a new project, anytime VS. Call this Deep Zoom. So now we'll build this real quick. So we get a client bin directory where it outputs is the XAP. All right, so there's our client bin directory, which is where we want to put our image file. So if you look, here's the images that were generated. As I mentioned, the tool's pretty aggressive. So the first one is just a dot. I don't know if anyone can see that. That's the picture. It's literally 1 pixel. It starts to get interesting around here-ish. Like that's the whole picture at least. And then you can see they've got it chunked into tiles. And so what we're going to do is we're going to just drag that whole folder into our client bin. So it's copying all those JPEGs. So now what we'll do is we will create a multi-scale image. Man. And we'll set the source. And we've got client bin. You know what? Hold on. I've got a feeling. Yeah, hey, look, the sparse image generator is taking all my CPU. Did I mention the tool has some quirks? And so what we want to point it to is this file here, info.bin. Oops, I should probably close my... What, did I screw something up? Oh, dude, no higher. It's a trap. So actually just, it's this. All right, that looks a little better. So there's basically, that's the default behavior of a multi-scale image when it gets the source set. It goes to the size of its container. So right now its container is kind of limited by this. So close this down. We'll nuke the explicit size. So now it'll be as big as the browser, which is kind of nice. So that's just kind of the default behavior. Now, if you want to zoom into this, we need to add some event handlers for zooming. So as I mentioned earlier, there's no zoom, mouse scroll wheel support built into the platform. So I've got a little helper that uses the HTML DOM bridge, and a little slice of JavaScript here, scroller.js. And I will drag this in. So this class right here is it's pretty straightforward. It just basically has a scroll changed event, and the scroll changed event has scroll changed event args, and that gives you the x and y point in the browser where the mouse is and how much the scroll wheel moved at delta. So it's pretty straightforward. The tricky part is doing all the script. So it's loading this JavaScript file, this slice of JavaScript, from the resources. So I'll tell this guy to be an embedded resource. So it's built into my DLL. So it loads that. It takes that JavaScript and injects it into the HTML DOM, and then it calls back onto this class once the scroll wheel happens, once the scroll event happens. So part of the HTML DOM bridge is the ability that you can mark types scriptable in managed code, and you can also mark methods and properties as accessible from script. So by marking this as scriptable, we've basically said that this thing can be accessed from JavaScript, and then we're also calling this member is kind of hangs off this guy. And so basically JavaScript calls back this with this information, just a string, and 3 strings, and then we parse those into integers and raise the event when JavaScript calls back. So now to use this, we will first give our multi-scale image a name. So we have to access it from code. Call it deep zoom. And we'll create one of our scroll helpers. And then we'll hook that scroll event, scroll changed event. So now we've basically got a point where when the user scrolls, or when the user does the scroll wheel on top of anywhere on the browser, we'll get an event here with the X and the Y location, which is in here, and the delta, all from the event args. So a little bit of code here. So what this is doing is it's creating a logical point. A logical point is between 0 and 1. So it's taking the browser coordinates that you've got, and it's mapping those to somewhere between 0 and 1 on the multi-scale image, on the deep zoom image. And then it's calling zoom about logical point on the deep zoom item itself. And basically, if the scroll delta is negative, we're making it smaller. And if the scroll delta is positive, we're making it bigger. So not too complicated there. So now when we run this, we can scroll right in, and you can see the detail. And you notice it's completely fluid and completely seamless. It's pretty nice. So however, this image isn't too terribly big, and despite how proud I am with my picture, it's not terribly interesting either. So I've got a couple other ones that are a lot bigger and have been pre-processed, and we'll show those. I'm going to open a pre-existing project. So these are just more folders I could drag in, but you saw how long it took to drag. That one was about 500K into VS. So these ones are a couple hundred megs. So whenever I drag these individual studio, it takes about 5 minutes for just to import them. So I'm just going to open them straight from here. That's a great question. There was a size limit a while back. One of these pictures that I'm about to show you came from a local Seattle artist, and it was his original Photoshop file was a couple gigs, and the tool choked on that at the time, but they were supposed to fix it. I'm not sure if that's quite reached the top of their priority stack yet for bugs to fix, considering the fact that it was just eating 80% of my CPU in a background thread. But I think eventually the goal is to not have size limitations, because that's kind of the goal of this technology, right? You want to be able to crank on 2 4-gigabyte images and not have to deal with the fact that on the client they're only small chunks. The rendering really doesn't take much CPU at all. It's really efficient. When the team first integrated this into Silverlight, basically the research guys who developed this did the initial dev work, and when they came to first demo it, they basically were talking a little trash about the blend speed in Silverlight, and our rasterizer devs took that to heart, and within about a week it was fixed. If Joe or I would have said something, they would have just ignored it, but these guys are like, oh, this stuff isn't fast enough for what we need, and all of a sudden it was fixed. So you just got to know how to poke people the right way. So we've got two different ones here. We'll throw up this first. So this should be a familiar image to many people. It's kind of a recreation of a Seurat painting. So it looks pretty familiar, although not your typical pointillism painting as we drill in here. What's this made of? Oh. It's soda cans, yeah. So this was made by Chris Jordan, a local Seattle artist. And originally, like, so you can see we can only go about this far before they start to look pixelated. The original one, you can go a lot deeper. So it's just really fun. And yeah, I mean, this image's JPEG all by itself is 500 megs, if you load the whole thing. So it's pretty cool. And this is not on my blog. My hoster is no. My hosting provider, which is one of my friends from the Cider team, he'd have words with me. Let's see. So the next one, this is a spiral. This one's kind of cool. So the team the original name for this technology was called C-Dragon, and so this one is kind of fun, especially when you start thinking about going deep into a deep zoom. So this one is, we kind of call it the wormhole. So you keep going, and there's the C-Dragon logo. So the really fun thing, though, is this. So this is just a fun little sample they put together. But again, this image is fairly ginormous to be able to zoom in that far. So anyways, that's deep zoom. There's some other parts of the functionality I haven't shown here. There's the collection stuff that the Hard Rock guy showed, where you can have a multi-scale image can have multiple images inside of it. You can have kind of sub-images, and you can kind of pivot and rotate and move them around inside of the multi-scale image container. Haven't shown that here, but it's definitely one of those things that you should, if you're really interested in this stuff, you can kind of go dig in and play with the SDK and the APIs on there. So that's what I got for my half of the talk. Again, just plugging the rest of the Silverlight talks are coming up in the next couple days. We've got Ed's media talk tomorrow morning. Karen's talk's following that right afterwards. We've got the Ajax talk Friday morning. So that's what I got. Thanks for sticking around so late. And thank you. And if you've got questions, come on up. Could you please use the microphones if you guys have questions? Thanks.
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Hi. With the new controls and stuff in Silverlight 2 effectively being a subset of WPF, will the watermarked text box control and the multi-scale image controls both be in the WPF control library as well?
So watermark text box is very easy, and
Sure.
the source there is out today. You can see what that is. It's dirt simple. So I mean, you can effectively have that in WPF today. You can just go take that code and compile it. And multi-scale image is a native control. It's built basically entirely in native code. So it will likely be in the next version of WPF, but it's not planned for. It's not in the 3.5 version.
Okay.
So multi-scale image is kind of special. There's a few places in media and things like C-Dragon where basically the goal is to have Silverlight always be a subset of WPF, but because of the staggered release schedule, they're not always perfect subsets.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Does this deep zoom tool support stitching, so you can take multiple pictures, stitch them together to get your overall?
So I don't know. I haven't played with it. I've only exported a single image with it. So you can go download that from, I think, either the Expression Team's blog or silverlight.net and go play with it. And it certainly seems like something it should do. Okay.
Hi, Mike.
Sorry.
The open file dialog, when I'm trying to open a file, should it always be returned from the file dialog box? Or can I use a string to open any file, a C:/?
No. So the open file dialog, you prompt the UI to the user, and they choose a file. You don't have any file system access in Silverlight. It's all about the sandbox. Right? So again, think about the typical things you can do in a web application, and that's the same kind of thing. From a web app, from DHTML, you can't just say, give me something from the disk, because next thing you know, your credit card numbers are stolen.
Yeah.
So we don't want you guys to lose your credit card numbers.
Is there any way I can reuse these animations? I create an animation and apply it to any object.
Yeah, so you can, with the .NET programming model now, you can create animations in code. You can, so obviously it's easier, well, it's more verbose in SAML, but you have a tool that helps you in Blend. But you can still use code to create a new timeline, and you can create storyboards, and you can add timelines to them, and you can basically do that all in code, and then you can apply those to other things.
But it has to be on code, can't be in markup. I can't reuse the markup animation which I've created.
Well, so you could probably use I haven't done this, but I'm imagining you could use XAML-reader.load with probably, some XAML and then like a templated string to change like what your target property is, and then have that be reapplied. It's fairly reusable. The fact that you can basically just take any slice of XAML and turn it into an object tree is pretty powerful.
Thank you.
All right.
In 1.1, I tried seamlessly looping audio with the media player, and every time it would hit the end, it would pause for just a split second, like it was reloading the audio from scratch rather than caching it or something like that. Is that? Have you ever?
So basically, we've had a kind of a feature request for ages. Well, ages as far as long as the product's been around, so a year and a half. To support seamless looping of audio. It's not something that we have done any work since 1.1 on, since Mix last year. We probably won't get to fixing that in V2. Because you're still basically... So Joe had an idea, which is to use the stream APIs on media elements. So you could get crafty, and Ed has some code. You can hit him up after his media session tomorrow that basically makes a fake MP3 header, and he just pumps data into it in the stream. And so you could do something like that where if you had an MP3, you could get that stream yourself, and you could basically just continuously fill it. So you could make your own looping endless MP3, if you will. So that's a possible solution. But as far as just looping a sound file, that's not something that we're going to be able to do in the Silverlight 2 timeframe. We just, you have to pick our battles, unfortunately.
Thanks.
I assume that you can save objects to disk using isolated storage. Is that right?
Yes. Well, the thing you save is a stream. So you have to find some way to serialize it to a stream, right? So you can use XML serialization. You can write it to a stream. You can have, do the dictionary thing like I have in my little sample there. But basically, at the end of the day, you have to do it as a stream. Now, if you're getting from the open file dialog, you can just blast that stream straight in there. But as far as raw objects.
There's a UFX added application settings class that kind of does your kind of local source thing, but it's kind of on steroids, and it automatically does the object serialization.
Is that? Oh, is that in the actual Silverlight core, or is that part of in the SDK? Very cool. What's the class name?
It's called application settings. It's in the
is that like the stuff that used to be in WinForms? Nice. These guys are laughing because Joe and I used to be on the WinForms team. So apparently there's actually a class. There's so much stuff in Silverlight we don't even know about it all. There's an application settings class that will basically take objects and serialize them for you.
And also, is there any way to query on that data other than linked objects?
To query on data? So are you talking about like doing talk to other data sources?
Like in isolated storage, if you had your own local database or cache or something like that, is there any way to query that data?
So, I mean, you could basically, I think link would be your best option there, just to put
just
XML there and just use link.
Okay.
And just load that back up.
In your deep zoom technology, can the tile size be anything other than 256 by 256?
No, it's basically automatically set to that. That's the research guys did a bunch of research and found that to be kind of the optimum size for as far as network, not having too many connections open at once, and and kind of optimizing the network performance. So they've tuned by experts, I guess, is the best thing I can say about that.
So there's a lot of the sounds you're showing, you're getting data, usually XML data, and displaying it. But there's also data out there that contains HTML, like RSS feeds. Are there any way of displaying these HTML snippets inside Silverlight with the formatting?
So there's not. There are a few samples floating around the web that I've seen so far, written on Silverlight 1.1, that can take HTML or subsets of them and kind of change it into XAML. But there's no really raw native way to do HTML. So a lot of the couple of different solutions to that. So you can, typically RSS feeds don't have a lot of complicated formatting, and writing something to translate that is usually within the realm of doable, depending on what kind of RSS feed you have. Another option is to actually just use the windowless mode on the plugin, and then just put HTML div on top of it. Depending on how HTML data heavy your app is, you can kind of go one of those two routes for options.
When you were using that navigation application before, or the feature, I was thinking when you were going to hit the back button, it wasn't going to work properly because I thought the collection would be refreshed randomly, and then you'd have an index. but it didn't work that way. What is the?
Well, so I wasn't reloading the page.
Right. So by we hit the back button, it's not reloading. Is what
No,
you're saying.
no. It's so what that navigation manager class does is it uses the typical Ajax hack of putting an iframe in there,
Okay.
and you're navigating the iframe. So the main page never changes and never is reloaded. You're just using that iframe as a way to get basically to stick something in the back and forward buttons and to get an event on that. And so you're basically just listening for that event and then returning the data. So the state of your app is never blown away by a page refresh. It's not like a traditional ASP.NET app.
So basically, you're intercepting the refresh or the back button, and
Yeah.
and basically you never really are refreshing that. You're just
No, you're never refreshing the page. It did click because
Right.
because you are navigating that invisible iframe.
Gotcha.
But that's what you're navigating. You're not navigating the rest of the page.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, that deep. Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead. All right. It's just a quick question.
You guys want to fight about who doesn't get to go?
That deep zoom tool that you were using, is that scriptable or is it just a standalone thing that you
I
have
think
to
it's just
churn
standalone right
through?
now. I mean,
Right.
I think about a month ago it didn't exist. So they had a command line tool that the guys who did the original research work had, but having a UI around it is a pretty new thing. So
Okay.
I'm actually not even sure who works on that, like who we could get connections with. So we could definitely get you know, I'm wondering though, like as far as public feedback goes, is there a forum for it in Silverlight.net?
Because I was thinking it'd be really painful if you had a collection of images.
Yeah,
You had to
I see what you're saying, right? You
close
want
the dialogue every time and everything.
Well, ideally, what you want is a command line tool at least,
Yeah,
so that you
that's
can
what I
go, so that you can have a server process where someone uploads a massive image and then
Yeah.
it does this automatically. Then you get back
Then you can make things
your
dynamic
link.
if you wanted to or anything like that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, if you ever want an automated ingestion process, I don't know if we're going to ship the command line tool. The folks that did this had an original SDK that had the command line tool in it. I'm not sure if that's public or not.
All right.
But at some point it will be. There will be much better tools by the time Silverlight 2 ships.
All right, that's cool.
So-
Thanks.
One of the things that is nice about Silverlight 2 is that you got like real honest-to-God controls. What are the accessibility improvements that are going to be planned by the time it releases out?
So we've actually been doing a ton of accessibility work. Is Mark right out here? Where's so basically I know the PM who designed all this stuff is here, but he's not here at this talk. But we've done a bunch of work to basically implement the MSAA interfaces on for Windows at least for all the controls, and so it'll work inside of IE and Firefox. And then each of the controls we've implemented the appropriate basically actions and properties for each of the controls to be accessible. So we have MSA support at least on Windows. There's not a great solution for the Mac right now for accessibility.
And does that carry over when you retemplate the controls?
Yeah, those are built into the controls.
Hey, I know when you deploy a Silverlight 2 application, it generates some type of zip file basically to compress everything. Are you guys planning on doing some type of obfuscation or lock it down so we can protect our IP?
So we've actually been doing a lot of thinking about that, but not likely in the Silverlight 2 timeframe. We've recently actually had a bunch of good ideas working with the folks who are helping us with DRM to think about some things there, because it's basically with DRM we're getting AES into the platform as far as encryption. So I don't imagine that there's something like that won't pop up in the future, because it's definitely something, a request we've heard a lot. It makes a lot of sense because you can take that zap that gets output, rename it .zip, double click it, and you can see what's in there. And of course, everyone knows managed code is everyone's used Lutz's reflector. They know everyone knows how to get code out of a DLL. So yeah, it's a very valid concern.
Thanks.
Hey, what about the video capture support in Silverlight 2?
Not in Silverlight 2. These guys are laughing because it's got to be near the top of the list of the features that we haven't got a chance to do yet. It's something we absolutely want to do. We're absolutely going to do it. It's on a roadmap, just not something we will have in this version. What was that feature request? That was video capture. So the ability to use webcam and microphone on your machine to do basically like a video chat, or just even capture it to store it on the server.
Hi, if it doesn't take a lot of coding, can you show that dialog box for additional space and storage?
Yeah, I can. It ain't pretty, but I can. Let's see where. So basically, I'll just let's see. So I'll just change when you click on the media element to do that. So let's see. So let's see. Try to increase quota 2, and we have to give it a really big number. This is in bytes, which is completely random. So that method returns true or false. Oh, come on. And we'll just alert whether it succeeded or not. So I've never actually seen this work, but the last time I tried it was about 2 weeks ago, so it may work now. Go network. So that's what the UI looks like. So it looks like it's taken whatever I chose to be basically unlimited size, which is not interesting. So okay, it does work. And then if I, oh, it doesn't like doing that again, does it? So there's definitely that API is one of the things that one of the very last things that came into the beta. So there's still some quirkiness around it, but it's there and it's working, and that's the UI. I'm not sure. Do they have plans to polish that UI? Okay, so that UI is definitely obviously you wouldn't want your parents clicking on that. So hopefully that'll get polished up before we ship. But
yeah, I can comment a little bit about that.
Okay.
So I don't know if they're going to change the UI for the prompt, but I know they're planning to add some additional config type dialogue, so you can kind of manage isolated storage. Like as an end user, you can kind of right click on the control, see what's using isolated storage.
Okay, that makes
clear
sense.
Stuff. So we are kind of fleshing this out a little bit. So
it would make sense too to have something so you could flush your ISO store cache, if you will.
This one's kind of for Joe. Is there a better way to map XML objects to real objects, to business objects?
So there's actually a pretty cool trick that some of the guys from Identity Mind showed me is you can depending on how much control you have over the XML format, but if you can get an XML format that can look a bit like XAML, because the XAML parser, what it does is it's objects instantiation and property setting, right? So if you can get XML formatted in a way that is roughly XAML compliant, you can make objects that are named for your XML types, and then you can give it to the XAML reader.load, and it'll give you back an object tree.
But can I give it like an XSD and then be able to pull that XML file back and have it automatically mapped to my business object?
You can do that using the data contract serializer. I believe Eugene's given a talk about it today or tomorrow.
He already gave it.
He did. He already
But in 24 hours, it'll be on the web.
Okay.
Which support basically XML serialization via the stuff that shipped previously in .NET Framework 3.5, the data contract serializer, which allows you to annotate effectively your business object with and tell it how it maps to XML, and then you can just take your XML payload and just call it deserialize effectively, and it'll automatically create the objects for you. I didn't use that because I need to shape my objects a little bit more, and so that's why I use the link for XML. But you can directly serialize it into objects.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah, my question is, I have a client that actually has videos that are not in like WMV or the typical Silverlight formats. They're in DICOM actually, which is a medical image format. How I typically have to display those now is I have to set up a timer at the right frame rate and image by image display it on the screen. Is there anything that in Silverlight that I can actually use do some of that?
We have a dispatch timer, which is much higher fidelity than the JavaScript timer, and we can do images, but you can't. There's no way to transcode them.
Well, you could transcode them, but these are large video files, and you'd have to do them on the server. I would think it would take forever.
Yeah, so what these guys are saying is the Silverlight streaming service supports transcoding now.
Okay.
But I'm assuming you guys have if they're medical images, you probably don't want them on a public place.
Oh, no, it's completely enclosed.
Yeah.
But, well, in a hospital anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
You still need me to transcode them. Yeah.
Can we use visualizers with in Visual Studio when debugging Silverlight apps?
Yeah, Joe's saying it should work. I've never tried it, so I can't vouch that it works, but it should work. The debugger is really just the CLR debugger, so it should just work. Have you tried it?
No. Have you ever seen one of those data tips come up when you go into a breakpoint?
Oh, yeah. They absolutely, yes, they do come up here. So I mean, you get all the built-in visualizers work. I'm not sure about custom ones. So I mean, you know.
Yeah, so they're like for your string over there. There's a data tip, so you could see it.
Which one? This one?
Yeah, you have to close that. You see those little magnifying glasses?
Yeah.
That's your, yeah. So now you can click on that and you can do that there. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. So I was just wondering if in order for us to use our own visualizers, we have to, it's a system debugger visualizer attribute that has to, because we don't have that today, right? Because I know that those are baked into Visual Studio. There is no, all right, so we don't have that today. Okay, thanks. Thanks,
All right.
guys.
Yeah, no problem.
That's all I want to talk.
Hey, I just want to say that was an excellent presentation, but I kind of came in a little bit late. I was wondering, what is your blog address so I could download some of these samples?
It's blogs@msdn.com/mharsh, but I'll show it to you so you can see it because.
All right,
it's
thanks,
easier
bud.
Yeah, no problem.
Is there alpha video support in 2L?
There is not alpha video support in 2L.
All right.
So it's basically the same set of media formats that we support. I'll talk about this tomorrow, but same set of formats in V1 in addition to WMA Pro and that some of the stuff that Scott talked about as far as the multi-bit rate stuff.
Is there plans for that at any point?
Definitely. Yeah, alpha video is definitely on the roadmap.
Cool. Thanks.
Yep.
On a keynote, that demo of Hard Rock they used for memorabilia, did they use Deep Zoom Composer?
Yeah, absolutely. That's how they were doing that.
Do you know when this Deep Zoom Composer will be available to everybody?
I believe it's out today.
So even though
Joe's saying it is.
Bags? Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah, I have like a build from a couple days on my machine too.
So where do we get the book?
That's a great question. I'm not sure where you get the book. The book that was handed out.
Mm-hmm.
I think they ran out of them.
Right.
So I'm not sure if they have any more.
So we can't, send out an email or something to people?
Matt Powell was the guy giving them away, but I'm not sure. What's his? Is it Matt POW? Is his alias?
Matt Powell.
I guess that's my question. There's no real definite answer, so I guess.
I'm not sure who wrote that book or where it came from.
Okay.
Yeah, we weren't actually responsible for giving out the book. Someone else came here and gave it out, and Matt Powell gave it out.
Okay.
So he's around the conference, Microsoft guy, and I'll try to find him and see if I can find the answer.
Okay.
I don't know, but if you see him, he's the right person.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Hi. I just came into the room, so maybe you already answered this, but the question is, are you planning to support UDP sockets in Silverlight?
Is Aaron still here? So the sockets, that's a question for our sockets PM, who is actually giving a chalk talk tomorrow.
Okay,
so currently it doesn't, but we've definitely done some thinking about that in the last month or so. So we've had a couple customers ask for that. So Joe, do you have the date on that?
It would be great for P2P, real-time networking.
I absolutely understand
games.
the scenarios, yeah. Oh, Karen, do you want to? Yeah, there's definitely no.
Sorry.
So, but again, Aaron O'Neill, who's the kind of PM behind sockets, is going to have a chalk talk.
I go there tomorrow.
Yeah.
Tomorrow
at 11.
Sorry?
Tomorrow at 11 in the sandbox.
Okay. And what about the roadmap for Silverlight? Is there a another speech about that? Future?
So that's a great question. I don't think there is a general chat about the roadmap. The roadmap for Silverlight 2 is, basically we'll have a beta coming up in the next quarter, another beta coming up in the next quarter, and then later this year we'll ship Silverlight 2. And then after that, I don't think there's any public roadmap.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
So two things. Is there a new tap starting up for Silverlight? I know the first tap is probably completing soon, or if it hasn't already.
So is anyone from DPE here?
Lawrence Mulroney and Tim Snead are the sandbox, and they run the program. And so you can, apparently they're not here, but you can talk to them, and they can give you the details on if and when there'll be another tap in the program.
Cool. Second question is on AES. Is implementation in Silverlight FIPS compliant?
I'm not sure, but right now it's not exposed publicly. Oh, are you talking about the stuff in the crypto APIs?
Right.
I don't know. So there's AES for the DRM stuff, which is kind of more of a closed system.
Right.
And I'm not sure if the crypto APIs are using AES or not. I'm not sure what they're... Okay. So I'm not sure about the compliance of that, though.
Okay.
It's probably the same code that's in the .NET Framework today. So if the .NET Framework stuff is...
In 3.5, they revved it, so the system security crypto became FIPS compliant. In 2.0 it wasn't, so I wasn't sure what they did with the Silverlight.
He has a question about the crypto APIs and whether or not, what was the question?
Are the crypto APIs, the AES APIs in Silverlight FIPS compliant? The 3.5 managed implementation is.
Oh, it is?
Correct, yeah.
I don't know. I don't own the crypto APIs. Let's talk offline. I'll find out.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Any help on converting VB6 to VB6 forms to Silverlight?
Well, that's a good question. It's certainly not something that we've got any official plans around. Trying to think how we'd even approach that problem. Are we talking a massive amount of code and forms?
Yeah, thousands of forms that are exactly right now that we want to be exactly right later after conversion.
Yeah, well, so I can think of like a multi-stage, slightly lossy conversion process of using the VB6 updaters that are in Visual Studio for moving into WinForms, and then there's a couple, at least one WinForms library for Silverlight that basically mimics a lot of the WinForms functionality that's kind of out there today. I think Telerik is the company that makes it. So that would be kind of a multi-hop, but you're not. I've never seen even a pretty simple VB6 app pop through the VB.NET converter. I'm sure you've seen the same thing.
Right. Control arrays are a big problem. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, guys, they're kicking us out. So if you guys want to come chat with us, you can feel free to come up to the stage.